Last year, the Piaggio MP3 celebrated its 10th anniversary, but make no mistake, it isn't the only three-wheeler on the market. There are traditional trikes, there's the Yamaha Tri-City, there's the god-awful Can-Am Spider, but the less said about that one the better, and there is also this thing, the Peugeot Metropolis. Now let's just get this out of the way. No, it's not very pretty, but what it lacks in good looks, it more than makes up for in practicality. It's a bit like marrying a tax lawyer. No, they're probably not going to be the best looking and they're probably as dull as a Mercedes paint colour chart, but damn it, your kids are going to be financially secure. You can actually ride the Metropolis with just a car licence. You don't need to do any bike test whatsoever, not even a CBT, although obviously you're not just going to jump into something without any knowledge or experience. You're not Donald Trump. But there are some big differences between this and a traditional two-wheeled scooter. Now let's start with the obvious. There are three wheels, two at the front and one at the back. Although this doesn't ride like a quad bike, those two wheels at the front do tilt. Each wheel has what is essentially a smaller version of a Peugeot car suspension that is capable of tilting in tandem with the other, but you are able to lock the tilt at slower speeds so the bike can stand up upright without any assistance. Behind the metabolic styling is a half disc brake which has a kind of parking brake attached to it that stops the tilt. However, there is also another parking brake which locks the wheels so that you don't roll away. It's all a bit complicated, but what it essentially means is that you don't need to put your feet down at traffic lights, and it's a little bit more stable in sidewinds, but I'll get onto that more when I go out onto the roads. Now let's just touch on practicality. As standard, you get four main areas of storage. There is a small cubbyhole under the dash that is, like a Reggie Yates documentary, surprisingly deep, and also comes with a power adapter for charging your phone or sat-nav. Around your legs you have a large compartment for various things, and also a bag hook for, well, a bag. Under the seat there is a shallow compartment that is big enough for a laptop bag or a bit of shopping, and at the back is a deeper compartment that will comfortably take a full-face helmet. Now, this being a French bike, there is also the added party trick of the two main compartments being linked together so that you can fit, well, what else but your baguette from the morning trip to the boulangerie, or the co-op at the petrol station in this case. In terms of passenger comfort, there are pull-out footrests for a pillion and an adjustable bum rest and windscreen. All joking aside, my wife and I actually decided to take this through its homeland of northern France, and we were surprised how suited it was. The seat was comfortable throughout the trip, the parking brake and tilt lock meant that it was perfectly happy sat on the deck of the ship, the cubby holes were perfect for passports and paperwork, and the optional RAM mount meant that we never got lost thanks to our sat-nav. That extra wheel at the front provided stability against side winds, and the adjustable windscreen provided wind protection on the motorways. Frankly, I couldn't fault it, but we're not in northern France anymore, are we? We're in good old Blighty. So let's take it out on British road and see if it feels as good. It doesn't take too long to start feeling very comfortable on this bike, but it does take a little bit of getting used to because it doesn't feel like you expect it to feel when you first throw your leg over it. Those two front wheels do tilt, but they don't tilt in the same way as on a traditional two-wheeled scooter, so you find yourself having to put in quite a bit of effort to get the bike over. But once you get out on the roads, you actually feel how comfortable this bike is, not just in terms of the big plushy seat with the bum rest and the adjustable windscreen, but also the 400cc engine is pretty good. It pulls pretty well, and this is a heavy bike. One thing that you notice when you're manually handling this bike is that if you didn't have that extra front wheel, it would be pretty awkward because it is heavy and it's also very long. I realise that a lot of people won't be able to get over the fact that it's not very pretty, but the thing is, it's interesting. If you're going to be ugly, at least be interesting, because then people will still come up to you and ask you about it. We've had so many people come and ask us about the bike and ask how it works, and to be honest, I got a lot more attention with this than I have on some of the other big bikes that I've been to, and sports bikes as well, because people can tend to be a little bit standoffish with sports bikes. With this, well, you're quite approachable, and it is interesting. One thing I can't quite get used to at the moment, in fact there's two things, is when you slow down, you do actually have a foot brake. Now that operates all three wheels together, but then you also have the handlebars which operate the front wheels and the back wheels independently. Now when I got this dropped off, the guy from Peugeot was saying that a lot of car drivers tend to use the foot brake because you can just drive this with a car license, but I don't like it. It feels a little bit like it's not really connected to anything, even though it is technically connected to all wheels. Well, I find myself using the handlebars a lot more. The other thing is, when you get below a certain speed, you can just lock the tilt so that you don't have to put your feet down, but when I do that, I find myself sort of going towards the curb a little bit, so usually I will just put my feet down. This bike is actually smaller than you feel that it is. You feel like you're on a much bigger bike, and sometimes that feels like you don't want to filter through traffic, when in actual fact it would be perfectly fine doing that. It's very comfortable in the city. In fact, it's designed really for the city. It's called the Metropolis after all. Setting the traffic lights here now, obviously I could just leave it loose, or I can lock the tilt, and at that point, oh, for some reason I've got the indicators on, I can just stand here, and I can also put the handbrake on because there is a separate indicator. Now it won't move at all. I can bring my feet up and just wait. Now I will have to take the handbrake off before I set off, but I don't need to actually undo the tilt lock, which I can do with this lever anyway, but it will unlock itself when I twist the grip. So if we wait here for the red light to change. So I'll take the handbrake off, twist the grip, and the tilt comes on. You won't be able to hear it, but it's beeping. There's a beep to warn you that the tilt is now on. And again, as we come up to these red lights, I will brake using the handbrakes. And this time I'm not going to lock it, I'm just going to use my feet and then set off again. Now there are moments where you're reminded that you're not on a traditional two-wheel scooter. One is with Roundabouts. Now, one thing you have to find yourself doing a lot is counter steering. You're having to sort of push the handlebar down in the direction that you want to go, or well, on the opposite direction if you want to go, hence counter steering. So it doesn't quite feel the same way as you'd expect it to feel on a two-wheel scooter, but it's actually very good for teaching you counter steering, or at least putting into context what counter steering is. The only thing is, though, that goes away completely at slower speeds, because at slower speeds, or with manual handling as well, the tilt actually isn't as much as you want it to be, or you realise that the bike is actually pretty heavy, in which case you find yourself turning the handlebars a lot more, and in which case it actually feels a lot like a quad bike. So you do have to sort of shift your driving style or your riding style a little bit, depending on what speed you're doing. Now thankfully, riding around on the Metropolis on British roads does actually feel as good as it did on French roads. The only thing is, I'm thinking with quite a practical cap on now. I could actually own one of these and feel myself living on it pretty comfortably. It'd be good to commute on, it's good to travel on, I can fit shopping in it, I can fit a sat-nav, there's good wind protection, there's all sorts. I've got a good comfortable pillion seat. Comfortable for me in my own bum, which definitely wasn't the case on the Ducati that I rode. But, well, what would happen, for example, if I was to jump straight off of this bike and onto a two-wheeler?
Okay, so when I said jump straight off one bike and onto the other, what I actually meant was wait a couple months, grow a beard, and then do it. But no matter, that aside, I'm now the main Peugeot importer for the UK, and I've got, well, pretty much the entire Peugeot range at my disposal, so you can't say it wasn't worth the wait. Now, I've got a few options available to me, but for this test I think it's probably better if I stick to a bike that I know, and seeing as my beloved little Django is here, I think it's about time we got reacquainted and see if it still feels as good after riding the three-wheeler.
I am actually very happy to be back on the Django. I've missed this little thing. And I'm actually riding the 125cc version here rather than the 150 that I had in the earlier test. And I'm actually quite happy with how plucky the engine is. In the other test I did actually say that the 150 was the one to have, and I probably still stand by that, but it's been quite comfortably sitting at 60 miles an hour, even in a headwind, which, I've got to say, that's quite impressive. One thing that you do notice when you jump on a two-wheel scooter when you've got used to the Metropolis is that it's a lot lighter and a lot less, well, in a way cumbersome, but in other ways you are also more exposed. But all Donald Trump jokes aside, there are actually a few reasons why you would want to go from riding a scooter like this to a 400 Metropolis. You've got to consider who these bikes are marketed at, because scooter riders can go their whole lives without ever taking a test. They'll do their CVT, ride around for 2 years on an L plate, and then do their CVT again, and while that's fine, you can get a little bit bored of that and want to move up to a bigger bike. Now with the Metropolis, you can do that straight away as long as you have a car licence. You don't need to do another test at all. You can jump straight onto a 400 and off you go, which for someone who is looking to
get on something a little bit more powerful, that's quite enticing. But, oof, may have just squashed my testicles a little bit. It's okay, I'm a professional, I'll carry on. As a little side note, I'm on now quite a big A road, and I'm still impressed with the 125 engine in this Django. The 125 might not be a bad option after all.
Well, I'm back at the dealer, and I have to say, while it might not be the prettiest thing in the world, I genuinely miss having my Metropolis. Had I jumped straight off this onto something a bit more light and nimble like the Django here, then I might have been tempted to go the other way. But after a couple of months and riding bigger bikes in between, I find myself going back to the three-wheeler, which I wasn't really expecting. The Metropolis really is a great all-round bike, and there's a lot of arguments for going from a two-wheeled scooter to a three-wheeled scooter. I'm just not sure I'd want to pay $7.5 or $8 to do so, but there you go. So the answer to the question posed by the video is yes, sometimes three wheels are better than two, just not in terms of looks.